As far back as I can remember, it's always been about Nike, except when I was 12 years old and in the 7th grade. And for a minute, it was about Reebok. Check these out. This is the original Reebok pump from 1989. It was definitely the thing to have back in the late 80s. They retailed for $180, which I just went and did the inflation calculator. It's $340 by today's standards. And you got to remember, back in those days, shoes were a lot cheaper than these ones were. So when this shoe came out, it was made famous by Dominique Wilkins. They were also worn by Dee Brown, and Michael Chang wore them on the tennis court. I've got an original Reebok pump ad right here from a 1989 Sports Illustrated, super cool. This was framed right behind the OG pumps, and these were on display in the bathroom next to the toilet at the ShoeZeum. Sort of my little joke to say that Reeboks are crappy. And I even had a fart machine that I could push a remote control and they would make noises. So when people were using the bathroom, sometimes the Reeboks would make a little bit of noise. Over here, I've got a pair of Reebok bringbacks. I don't know if you knew this or not, but Nike has retros and Reebok has bringbacks. These came out in 2009, and they were part of the 20th anniversary of the Reebok pump. You can see that they're a lot cleaner than the original vintage pair, and these were on display next to one another in the ShoeZeum. These shoes are numbered, and they were released at a handful of boutiques all over the country. This one says 19 of 29 from Undefeated. And they were also released at Bodega and a whole bunch of other sneaker boutiques. I can't remember the last time that I needed to get a pair of Reeboks, except for this. Well, it was probably in 7th grade with these. Of course, my parents never let me get my hands on these, but I really only wanted them for a short minute because Reebok inspired Nike to make way cooler pumps. So let me get these back here where they belong, and we'll put the real beauties right up in the front. The original Nike pump is called the Air Pressure, and it also came out in 1989, and it retailed for $190. Let me grab them. Check out this case. Nothing would be cooler than showing up on the basketball court or to elementary school with this case to carry your basketball shoes in. These shoes were worn by David Robinson, who at the time was just getting his NBA career started. I'm afraid of these shoes, no joke. Actually, I'm afraid of all of my Nike pumps. I will very gingerly and carefully remove them. Even the case is something to be afraid of. So these beautiful shoes were worn by David Robinson in the early part of his career. This translucent case snaps. It's got a little strap for you to carry them around with. Move it out of the way for now. And there's a pump inside the case that would go on the heel of the shoe, and you'd pump up the shoe. And the Air Pressure was Nike's first attempt to put some sort of air cushioning in the upper of the shoe. Remember, we've already got air going on in the midsole and sole of the shoe, but in 1989, the idea was to get some sort of air cushioning in the upper. And it was all about a unique custom fit. So you'd put the shoe on, pump it up, and this area around your ankle would close up to remove any sort of space, and they would fit you like a glove. You can see that the pump part is sort of falling apart, and I know you'll notice obviously that these shoes are shrink wrapped. I'm keeping them shrink wrapped because these shoes really deteriorate. The back part where the pump goes in just cracks and chips and falls away. There's nothing you can do about it, and I've never seen a pair that's actually held up in perfect condition. And the ones at Nike that are always on display in the lobbies look way more beat up than these. These are brand new, perfect condition other than that deterioration back there. And I absolutely love them. On display next to these Air Pressures, I had 2 packs of 1989 Hoops basketball cards. When these came out, I was 12 years old, and I was collecting baseball cards and basketball cards. I've always been a collector, so it's really like no surprise that I had this crazy collection of shoes. It was the evolution of my love of collecting. In 1989, Hoops came out with basketball cards. It was a brand new company, and the best card to have was the David Robinson jersey card, and everyone that collected cards wanted it. These packs actually have David Robinson jersey cards on the front. If you look through the cellophane, you can see that they're completely sealed in perfect mint condition. And these packs sort of inspired me to want to elevate the game of sneaker collecting. I wanted to make something like this, mint, dead stock, and pristine. I wanted to do to sneaker collecting what already was going on with sports cards and stamps and coins, and that was one of my inspirations to build the ShoeZeum. And now, fortunately, with things like the Paranorman box that says dead stock seal intact, Nike's caught on to this idea of uncirculated, perfect condition shoes. So in 1989, we had the Air Pressure, $190. By today's standards, that'd be $360, outrageous. I wanted them so badly, no way were my parents going to let me have them. And remember in 1989, the Air Jordan that was out was the 4. So keep in mind the Air Jordan 4 compared to these boots. And one last thing, the Air Pressure inflation device was actually inspired by ski boots. Ski boots that would pump and seal right around your ankle. And that was Bruce Kilgore's inspiration in the design of these shoes. Bruce Kilgore was the designer of the Air Force One. Let's move on. Here's another pair of pumps that I'm afraid of. Vintage orange and gray box. You gotta love these. This pair of shoes was $3,150. And I remember seeing the auction on eBay and thinking, should I do it? Should I do it? I talked to a few people about it. I needed to do it. I needed to have them. I'm glad I did because I don't know if I'll ever see them again. This is the Air Command Force, which is the second generation of the pump after the Air Pressure. Let me very gently grab the other pair out. I want to get this box out of the way. I'm as afraid of the boxes as I am of the shoes. Move it right over here. And let's talk about these shoes. So $3,150. The second pump, also worn and made famous by David Robinson. These shoes are perfect, pristine condition. No cracking, no chipping, unlaced. They have the laces inside the shoes. They even have the David Robinson hang tag, which is sort of like the Michael Jordan 1 hang tag. We'll look at that one in a second. But you'll notice that this also has this speckled midsole, which is sort of like the Air Jordan 4 that came out in '89, the year earlier, along with the Air Pressure. The Jordan that was out along with these was the Jordan 5. The reason why I'm talking a lot about the Air Jordans and comparing them with the pumps is there was this dichotomy between Flight, which was Michael Jordan, and Force, which was David Robinson and Charles Barkley. And the Force athletes' shoes were big to absorb the pounding and the landing on your feet, as opposed to the Flight shoes, which were sort of more low-profile, three-quarter shoes meant for flying. And they sort of pitted the two against one another. These are the epitome of the Air Force line, the Pressures and the Command Forces, and then the next pump that we'll look at in a minute. But let's have a look at the other pair. You'll notice there's no yellowing, no deterioration, perfect condition. Midsoles have no chips or cracks. You've got this retro card with David Robinson here on the front of it. Man, I love these. You know who else wore these and made them famous? Billy Hoyle. Remember him? Woody Harrelson from White Men Can't Jump. He wore these during the infamous scene against Wesley Snipes, and I always envisioned in the ShoeZeum a movie playing in the background of them playing horse, close-up of the shoes. If you go on YouTube and check out White Men Can't Jump, you'll be able to find clips of that amazing scene in these shoes. It sort of gives me the chills. Let's move on and have a look at the last and final of the Nike pumps. And this one came in a silver box. It's called the Air Force 180 High. And Nikes are always evolving. You'll notice that here you had to carry a pump and pump it up at the heel. On the Command Force, we got the pump right here on the ankle. So there's no need to carry a pump around. You would pump the shoe up at the ankle and release it back at the heel. That's the same thing with the 180s over here, but Nike's always evolving, always getting better, always getting cooler. So when you think 180, you should be thinking of the 180 degrees of visible Nike Air. So the big innovation on this shoe was that the air bubble got bigger than it did on the Command Force. These have the same pump mechanism as the Command Force. Pumps right here on the side, releases back here actually instead of on the heel. So slight variance. You'll also notice the speckled pattern on the Command Forces. Let me get this box out of the way. So the speckled pattern all over the midsole started off with the Air Jordan 4. Think about the Air Jordan 5 and 6 that was out at the time of these shoes. One of them was inspired by a fighter jet, another one was inspired by a Porsche. These things are like boots, literally. So I had the original Reebok ad, got to have the original Nike ad. Here it is for the Air Pressure. And then I had another original Nike ad for the Command Force. Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood. There was a whole series of ads that Nike did around David Robinson called Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood. And it was things mocking David Stern and talking about Charles Barkley and giving gifts to Mr. Robinson on his birthday. You should definitely have a look on YouTube at Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood. You will crack up. So Nike never retroed this amazing pump technology. But they did give us these sort of weak-ass wannabe pumps. This is called the PR1 HOH. It's inspired by the Air Pressure. The 1 is because it was the first pump. HOH stands for House of Hoops. If you ever notice on a Nike box, it could say HOH there. It means that the shoe was originally made to be sold at the House of Hoops, which is a partnership between Nike and Foot Locker and specializes in Nike basketball. So here's the Air Pressure. You know, when they came out, I was really excited. When I found out that they didn't have the pump on them, I was pretty bummed out. But I did buy them because I felt like they deserved to be in place with their ancestors. And then, just recently, Nike also gave us another half-ass pump, the Air Force 180. They call it a mid. Funny thing about that is this is a high. The mid was worn by Charles Barkley. It didn't look anything like this, except it did have this 180 sole on it. But you can see that this shoe right here resembles the 180 down here, but again, without the pump technology. So I really don't know why Nike bothered making these shoes without what made them cool, especially because 20-something years ago they had the technology and were able to do it. One last thing, these shoes are very reminiscent of the Air Mag, the Marty McFly shoe. Not just because Back to the Future 2 was in 1989, the same time as the original pump, but a lot of people think of the two shoes as being very similar to one another. So I want to grab my pair of Air Mags, and we'll have a look at them on display with the rest of all of these boots. So 1,500 pairs of these in the world. They were sold on eBay. All of the money went to Michael J. Fox, Parkinson's research. These shoes are absolutely incredible. Rumor has it that in 2015, we're going to get another run of them, and they're going to lace themselves up. Remember the amazing thing about these shoes in the movie, Michael J. Fox puts them on, they have power laces, and they lace themselves up right around his foot. And so in 2015, we're supposed to get that same technology. Nike's already filed for a patent for that technology, so we're really expecting and hoping for it. And it's like, you know, if they could make the pump technology in 89, 90, 91, if they could make these mags that are really cool, that light up, but that don't yet lace themselves up, but in just a couple years, we're going to have self-lacing shoes, I would argue that they should have taken the time to wait until they re-perfected the technology before issuing that PR1 HOH or the Air Force 180 mid retro of these shoes. Who knows? Maybe they'll have a look at this video. Maybe they'll have a look in the Department of Nike archives. Maybe it'll inspire them to recreate these amazing shoes. I know I would buy them for sure.